Salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All righty, so hopefully everybody had a chance to review last meeting's minutes. Are there any questions or concerns with them? Hearing none, may I please get a motion to approve the minutes? Thank you. Seconded. So all those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Raise your right hand.
Aye.
That was unanimous, wasn't it?
Yes, it was unanimous.
Usually is, but wanted to check.
Yes.
Well, perfect. Well, in that case, I can hand it over to you, Dr. Calista.
Really don't have much to update. I think obviously people are seeing what's going on legislatively. I think we're working through some very difficult things across the state. We do not, there are some spaces that don't have legislators there, and so there's not a ton of movement taking place. So we have, again, the main bills that we have talked about here. We continue to focus on those, but to some degree, there's not really been any movement of any bill of any sort. So we haven't received any update. Again, last Wednesday, we did receive, I'm sure many of you have already read, just the good news from the June economic forecast. So that's great. I do think there are viable pathways to 10.3 billion for the state school fund. But again, I think we're just, we'll see how that goes. We haven't heard anything since then. So we will keep advocating and moving forward, and hopefully, I don't know that we won't be making any decisions tonight, I guess is what I would say. I think we are sort of in that same position as we were being able to share a little bit more of some of the additional funds, but outside of that, I don't know that we're going to be able to, or that would be, as a superintendent, I don't know that we're going to be in a place to make a decision tonight, budget wise. So
we don't know where we're at.
I think what is important to say, right, the economic forecast is positive.
very much.
So the feeling that potentially the entire general fund budget would include more than 9.9 for the state school fund, 9.9 billion for the state school fund. It is commonly believed that there are some, as superintendent said, some paths to 10.3 billion. But some general consensus that even as the Republicans have stated that are not currently appearing in the legislature, that are currently staying away, have said our priorities are housing, education, criminal justice, and mental health, right? So being put as one of those 4 priorities, should we have a path to get some work done, is promising. And at that, I think I'm on certain legislative calls, you're on certain legislative calls, Susan's on other legislative calls, and I think we're all hearing from our lobbyists that 10 billion, 10.1 billion, those are doable. Those are pretty easily doable. Beyond that is still not guaranteed. Do you have other information from your Susan?
No, I mean, I didn't even get that number.
Yeah.
They basically were holding back on any speculation, and except for the fact that talking about the numbers all came in way ahead of where the economists were projecting.
And again, it's the proposed budget is currently 9.9 with the Ways and Means. Again, there's been no movement on that.
Right.
So I think that's, again, I think Cease and I have had conversation just at this point. That's what a little bit of what we're sharing, but we're going to give you a handful of scenarios to see what the difference would be But until there is some sort of movement, motion, again, there's a proposed 9.9 at this point, but that's not been, Ways and Means hasn't moved on that as of today.
So can you share a little bit of, what is the process? I mean, let's say we end up at 10.2. What's the process to get from a 9.9 proposed budget to a 10.2? Is that all in Ways and Means, or does the governor have to get involved? Or
It'll go back. Ways and Means has to balance the budget.
Yeah.
So if Ways and Means says 10.2. And balances all the other funds around that. Then that would go to both houses to pass. Right, the House and the Senate and the governor's signature.
OSBA has shared some language that and are encouraging people to write to their representatives, or school board members to write to the representatives to say, and I can share that. I didn't bring it with me. I could probably look it up.
Yeah, we put one in the Friday.
Oh,
report.
you came in yours. Oh, in the Friday report.
Yeah, we did a combination
There was
because
another one.
we've received a couple different
That's right.
messaging and we did want to share it. And again, I would say even to budget committee members, that to be able to reach
And
out. as well.
they're reading them too, because I got responses.
Oh, you already sent yours.
Yeah,
I was trying to tweak them a little bit so they weren't.
I got responses. And it sounded like it wasn't an auto. Hey, buddy, thanks for calling Joe Schmo, because they were.
Who'd you send it to at all?
To Paul Evans and to Deborah Patterson.
You heard from both of them? That's good.
Same day.
So I think typically at this time of year in this type of legislative session, we are often at this point. Where we don't know what it will be, and I think the complication really is that right now the Senate is not meeting. I think we're all hearing that there's a difficult path to get them to meet. That the negotiations that would be required to get a quorum are potentially going to draw the session out to its end without potentially a conclusion.
So what's the default position then? Because I've been hearing the same, that they potentially don't meet again.
Yeah.
Which means no budget gets approved. So is there a default
Yes,
number that?
So the legislature has passed what's called a continuing resolution. Just like the federal government, we're not approving anything new, but we're approving to continue the way we are if we don't have something new. So there will be funding, not cut off to zero, right? Yeah.
But what is that number though? On the continuing resolution?
Currently, the state school fund in the current biennium is at 9.3 billion. So that would
Less.
continue at that rate until they are able to meet in special session and.
Then they, sorry, well, would they fill in the gap then? From that time of that 9.3?
Sure, if they
And then it goes back. into it?
potentially.
Yeah, there is a potential for back pay, as we like to call it, or back funding.
Yeah. They would, if they say, nope, we're not gonna meet, it becomes the constitutionally declared final day of this session. They close it out, the governor calls a special session, they meet in special session, and they choose to fund it 9.9 or 10.1 or whatever. Then we will get all that money. They'll say, here's what the calculation is that you would get minus what you've already got, and catch us up.
Okay.
We do that in the state school fund all the time. Other agencies don't do that. They don't rebalance every 3 months. We're used to that. So it just becomes an issue of cash flow potentially for districts that rely on that money. They have to get, they've already planned expenses to increase and then potentially be funded at the same level. That can cause some cash flow issues. Much as our board heard us say, we had a bit, we we had to go without state school fund payments at all in January, February, March, because our auditors had not submitted an audit. And so, but cash flow wise, we would have not. Some districts would have not been in our fortunate position.
My assumption would be that, assuming the worst case, that we're operating at a 9.3 level. That
That's best.
this district would probably be good for half of the year, maybe.
We probably not quite that long. The thing about even for general fund and for cities and counties, this is particularly true. For us, school districts, it's a little bit true, and that is October can be a bear. November, you get all your property tax payments. So the big bulk of property taxes come in November each year. When I present you our year to date, I always say, well, you know, September, it's looking a little low on that line item. And then in December, we get 85% of our property tax revenue showing on that general fund income. So that is one consideration. But the other thing is, another weird thing about the state school fund, we don't get a payment in June. That's when they rebalance us. So we don't get a payment at all in June. And then in July, we get a double. So you get a little bit of breathing room to get through July, August, September, October, November, because you get 2 months in June and July, knowing you're not going to get one in June. It's not for the faint of heart, people.
So if am hearing correctly, then, if the Senate does not get back into session, reconvene, then the continuing resolution is 9.3.
Correct.
And we wouldn't get to even the 9.9 without a special session being called
That's my understanding.
to approve the budget.
Because the
And we would-
resolution only goes through September 15th
The
of 20,
continuing resolution.
correct. So
so
that,
there
that
has to
special
be one
session would
before,
have to be before September 15 of 2023.
which is before the October that you're saying is stuff.
Correct.
So we would expect to see a special session over the summer sometime.
Yes, I think that if this is the pathway that's going to be, and we cannot, or we do not have, at least right now on the Senate side, have senators coming to work through some of this, that is potentially the pathway the governor would have to go.
That makes sense.
Good
So-
news, you've heard us talk a lot about unfunded new legislation. That won't pass
Yeah.
either.
So that's part of where when I say I don't have an update, it's because to some degree, we are stalled. I mean, to be very honest, that's sort of where we are.
So then as far as a budget goes, would we try to approve a 9.3 budget and then come back later and,
So I would not recommend that because if that happens, I mean, the state's gonna shut down. The schools, the
Right.
state agency, everybody's gonna shut down if we have continuing resolution to get us through the whole next year.
gotcha,
I would say, plus, if you budget higher, appropriate higher, you can always spend less. And the board can say, let's do a budget adjustment down. So we still would budget at least 9 million,
gotcha, okay.
because that's.
As
the
a starting
number we
point.
have.
Yeah,
Because again, we just talking, right? Like right now, talking is talking.
right.
I think that's the hard part about this is we do have, at least from the Ways and Means, a proposed 99. Right? So that, again, you have the people that are there to help make those decisions from that perspective. At least that has been stated. Again, I think we've got a ways to go. But I think we continue to advocate. We need to continue to say 10-3. Because we believe, viable pathways to that. To continue the growth and learning of our students
And again,
and support our
that's
staff.
not just the first year, but the second year of the biennium when ESSER goes away and that additional, all those additional services also would drop off unless we get to 10.
And if they have done this before where they had walkouts and but I don't recall what happened with budget.
They came back on the last day and approved all the budgets.
Which was my first year, because I remember coming to you
They
all,
did it 2 years ago.
right?
Yeah,
I mean,
I-
we've multiple times we've come June 26th or somewhere along those lines to, you know, bring the board in a special board meeting to just do final approval. So that could be the case. Again, we talked about that, I think, even as a budget committee. I mean, going next or 2 Mondays from now, we may have a better picture. We may be to a point that we can say approve, or we may ask you, we want you to approve the 9-9, and as he said, you know, maybe we'll have a little bit more information from that. So I think that we want to hold that meeting, and to be very honest, board of directors, I think we've got a board meeting first part of June, and then we have a PLC at the end of the month. We probably will hold that also as a potential.
The adoption, which is the board of legal. As has been the case, because we've been dealing with what is our end fund balance. And things like that. So that's not different.
So I guess what I was thinking, and it'll be interesting to see what other people's thoughts are, but there's a high likelihood that the next time we meet, we're not going to know anything more than we do now.
Potentially, yep.
And that we end up having to adopt a budget or approve a budget, whichever the term is, before even really knowing anything more than what we know today.
Correct.
Sitting here. So our two pathways are either throw a dart at the wall, figure out what that number we think it's gonna be, and work on getting that budget approved, or wait and hope we get more information, and then be in more of a time bind.
So I have some options here for you for that.
Okay. I'm
So we
thinking-
can, there is something for y'all to look at, discuss.
But don't you have to submit a budget?
Well, and that's-
So, yeah.
We have, the board has to adopt a budget by June 30th. And that's, again, we are,
We could amend it.
and then you can play with it all you need to.
Right.
I think there's just, and correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, because if it shifts from, if we adopt a 9-9, and I don't want to say this incorrectly. And it goes to 10-3, we potentially would have to pull the budget committee back together, because that is a significant
That would be a
gain.
huge-
So that, I would say that's also something that we, and let's say again, that June meeting, we feel comfortable, let's do a 9-9. Let's say we don't get consensus, and as of, again, I'm making this up, July 4th, just kidding, July 3rd, they pass 10-3. We may want to pull back together
They
if they do a special session. I know it's gonna take her longer to get
They
that
would not
going.
have a special session in July and take
Yeah,
it
for sure.
longer.
Well, that's what I hope for. I can always try and
Yeah,
push
good
people.
luck, that's,
On
so,
on the flip side of that, we could also approve a budget based on 10-3.
Yeah.
Knowing that we're likely gonna have to come back and cut it back.
right. So just,
Yeah,
move
go
forward.
ahead.
So in your emailed version or in the full packet tonight is a sheet that looks like this, which I call general fund scenario.
I got it.
And the general fund, those on the screen, the general fund scenarios are divided into sort of 3 sections. One is our current, so our state school fund as of the 2023 budget at 9.3 billion. This is our original budget was 29.8 million. But after the rebalancing of the pot throughout the year, our final payment for 22-23 was paid out at 30.3 million. So that's the money we have right now. So potentially with the continuing resolution, that's what we would be operating.
All these figures are just state school fund. only.
State school funding. So the next section, 23-25. With the ADM, the weighted ADM, that we have based our budgeting on. I then show what does 9.9 look like, what does 10.0, 10.1, and 10.3 look like. The bottom, we actually, when they rebalanced 21, 22, they gave us actual credit for a slightly higher ADM, just a teeny bit. So I took that number as saying that would then become the number we would use this year. And what does that look like at 9, 9, 10, 1, and 10, 30?
Question real quick.
Mhm.
What does ADMW stand for?
So that's average daily membership weighted. And again, that is, our average daily membership are, I call it regular, it's residential, is student enrollment factored by attendance. The weights are the additional credit, the additional weights we get for special populations. So we get an additional full weight for students, certain percentage of students experiencing disabilities. We get an additional quarter weight for students identified as emerging bilinguals. We get an additional weight for a teen parent or a foster student or a student. So those weighted numbers and usually, well, in the actual budget book, I give you our breakdowns. You can see how that's factored, but I can get that out to everyone too, to remind you of what we're looking at. So the payment, the state school fund payment is on this ADMW.
And that in some way is like dollars per kid, right?
Dollars per kid. You take the ADMW and you take the funding ratio, which is a huge
Yeah,
calculation.
huge algorithm.
Huge big old thing, and multiply it by 3. That's how you get these numbers.
And there's some pieces of it that teacher experience ties into that. So there's a couple other
Yeah.
parts of the algorithm that, you know, again, just as an example.
So she says it's still a 1.5 and a 2.0 for the weights, or is there something higher than 2.0?
We don't have any 2.0.
Okay,
1.0 is our highest.
right. No, the 1.5, right, for students experiencing this.
There were 1.0. That's the highest we have. They're 1.0.
When did that happen?
My whole life.
It's the waiver.
The waiting is.
The waiting, right?
Wait.
Oh, I'm sorry. So, wait, you know, every kid gets, I see, every student gets a 1.
Right.
Okay, every
Yes.
student gets a 1.
So if you
The
add
weight,
that plus
the
the one.
additional weight,
Yes.
the additional weight for 2.0 is the highest
Yeah.
because students experiencing disabilities over 11%
Yeah.
is an
Okay.
additional 1.0. I see. Yes.
So that's been happening all my life too, so thank you very much.
Am
Am I in a dark cave?
Slightly different way of saying it.
So that, what you are looking at tonight and what accompanied that is actually a little more ambitious. It
Can I
is
ask one last
the,
question about that? I'm sorry, the waiting. It's reevaluated how frequently?
3
3
times
times
a
a
year.
3 times a year.
And then we can adjust that. Cece and I, again, watch our enrollment, we talk through it. Again, we tend to see at times, and not so much this year, but in the past, January, we see significant drop and then we see it recover. We've been more consistent a little bit this year than we have in the past, which is great because we want that consistency of what I'm gonna say is enrollment. We've had an increase a little bit back and forth with our emergent bilinguals, which is again part of that. And then we have seen an increase in our students experiencing disability. So we believe we potentially are going to go above that 11%. So that will play into, that potentially could play into the factors going through next year. and where there might be some adjustments.
But remember that whatever changes we have,
happens
every other
sometimes.
district has them, it doesn't. Right.
3889.3 is the weighted number, and that's the number of students.
That's the weighted,
That's the way to,
that's the weighted,
because remember,
3130.
we're
We're using,
31, I think you're right, 3170. We came
we're
up,
using an ADMR of 3170, and then you add the weights to get.
So that's
to this.
because 20% of our budget is amount, is weighted.
yes,
Yes,
yes.
so
That money on those kids too, we're not, it's not,
And
it's
more.
like we're, it's not.
And more.
And more, I know it's not like we're getting extra money for them because the education for those students costs way more than what we're getting.
Yeah.
So what you have before you tonight actually uses the higher numbers on here, the projected possible, the second line from the bottom, 10.1 billion for the state school fund, which gives us a state school fund grant of $31,712,137. So also what you receive by email, the same old colored grant form, colored form, translates that onto the revenue page. Our 3101 state school fund, I use $31,712,137. The only changes you will see on the expense side, if you pull them out from the last meeting, is in the contingencies. Oh, and I'm sorry, one correction. I also added a little bit more to the beginning fund balance because our look back for 21-22, the first look we got at it said the general fund was going to be down $500,000. But after they rejiggered everybody, it was only down $200,000. So I added 300,000 to the beginning fund balance, which is highlighted in yellow.
Use 10.1.
I used 10.1 at our slightly higher rate. I used 10.1, not 10.3, but I did use 10.1 for this.
And how firm is the beginning fund balance?
So the beginning fund balance is looking like this will be it. But the cash basis, and they just ran the May payroll, and so I had to get that today. So as soon as I get that in the morning, that could change. So changing that beginning fund balance by upping it by 300,000 and by upping the state school fund. The only changes on the expense side are to the bottom, which is the contingencies. This doesn't increase our spending on computers. It doesn't increase our spending on any other item other than refilling those contingencies somewhat.
So last time we talked about the new curriculum by the high school, I think it was from.
Yeah, 6 through 12, yeah, language arts.
Language arts. So does the 10.1 include spending that money?
All that did is get the curriculum contingency a tiny bit more money. It did not fully fund 2 curriculum adoptions next year. So it's like I say, so if you go through and compare expense over expense, what this did is anytime we increase revenue, operating revenue, like the state school fund, it automatically increases the first contingency, which is number 811 operating contingency, because that's just a flat percentage. So it increased that. You see here a PERS or wage contingency And, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
Jen? That's a new, that was not on.
We've been tasked to do some comparables administratively. There has been, some pieces where we are falling behind. And so we've started some work and are almost complete with looking at comparables from an administrative perspective. So that potentially is going to be a part of the conversation that we will share with you all. I think we have a really good leadership team in the school district, and we don't want to lose those people. I think we're doing amazing work, and we're, again, if you all saw the announcement today, we are bringing in also a new middle school principal that we're very excited about. So just some things that we have to look at to be very honest, be competitive, because we do have competitors around us as well. And so we need to stay at pace. So that's partly why that's built in there.
So the carryover starts at 7.3. And then this is at the 10.1.
Correct.
It starts at 7.3, but then we eat into that carryover by 2 million. Where would you say the biggest driver of that?
Well, and for one thing, we always sort of budget that way. It always ends up being nothing. The biggest driver is increases in payroll costs.
Yeah.
Right, we
But
have
this is-
no
this is not-
increases.
This is not, I mean, this is incorporating that shrinkage in administrative salary.
It currently shows a slight on the administrative salary line, it shows us shrinkage partly because of the way we've shifted some funding of administrators. We had them last year budgeted in general fund. We moved them to ESSER in effect, or some of the other funding they got. By the way, we ended up assigning work. Some folks get a tiny bit of administrative salary out of funds like after school, title, and
IDEA,
IDEA.
which is tied to special education.
So right now it shows a slight decrease on that line item.
Right.
But that's before this reclassification and comp study.
Okay, so this will still leave us room to do what we need to do. You think do?
We believe so, but again, I think that's what we are still working through that.
Yeah, I'm looking at this wrong, but I have the one that we looked at before, and I don't see any difference in the, that between 111 and 130. Those are all the salaries.
So all those
Yeah.
expense lines are the same.
Okay,
I think what Byron's looking at comparison to prior year,
okay.
it's, no. Every line item stayed the same in the
Except the
expense side,
contingencies.
except those 800s,
Right.
which is the contingencies.
Those I
So
just looked at.
refilled the capital repair and deferred maintenance contingencies a little bit, so you pretty much wiped those out. Refilled the student or the PERS reserve that I kind of wiped out.
You were worried about.
And increased the student services or special needs contingency, which again, we've kept the last few years because you get one new student you don't know about, and that requires hiring additional staffing. Those students need one-on-one or two-on-one staff support. So we've started that contingency, and we had it at 100, and I'm using this 10.1, moved it up a bit in case some of this legislation passes. We would pull that funding up into the upper line.
And I would expect, again, just if that legislation goes through, we will come to you probably early to adjust that to the board members. I think that's a reality. Again, we've got, it's the middle of May, but we've got a ways to go here still, so.
So if, again, like say, Chair Swan, we can kind of give direction, move forward, and be prepared to pass a budget at the June 5th meeting. Based on this, if we feel comfortable with this, and then who knows if that's going to be it or not. We are not likely to do anything different.
That's kind of what I'm.
But I wanted you all to see what that looks like. If we are slightly more optimistic based on the state revenue, the economic outlook from last Wednesday. Feeling comfortable with this. This is what it would look like, and this is what I would present back to you on June 5th, along with all of the grant funds.
But if we approved 9.9 and then we ended up getting more, the process for doing that would be done after. you know,
Right, we
that
would
number.
have budget adjustments afterwards. The problem is,
So we don't have to do it line by line or anything. We
No.
could just say we approve
No.
this new budget.
yeah, well, we do it by major functions.
Uh,
But the big problem is technically state budget law doesn't allow you, hey, we have more money. So therefore I'm gonna ask you to adjust the budget.
Oh,
In this case, we could make our case because it was not legislatively appropriated. But typically just saying, oh, we ended up with more money than we thought, so.
and you also can't approve contingent on more than one option.
You can. But
Seems complicated,
the
but
budget, the board has to adopt a single
budget.
number,
I see.
right?
So there could be, yeah, so there could be recommendations coming out of this committee to the board that says, we feel confident that it
Well-
could get to a 10-1, but the board still can make that decision. Again, I think that's still. a
The
tough
board
one.
can do less. It can't choose to go more than 10% above what the budget committee
So we
approved
shouldn't-
without an additional hearing, which requires additional
And I-
notice.
So we shouldn't
Which
pass
is-
9.9.
Exactly.
Because of that rule. I got it now.
Right,
So what,
because if we do that, then we are gonna have to come back and
We'll,
have
we'll come back and have.
full budget committee.
so why not go for 10.3? Because taking money back is easier.
Yeah,
It
Um,
looks bad though.
we can do that, and basically at this point, which if you look here, the difference between the 10.1 on the bottom and 10.3 on the bottom, it's another 1.5 million.
Right.
I would not recommend we put that into hiring new positions. I would recommend, I mean, I could put it all in computers, I can put it all in more contingencies.
What we're doing
Frankly,
is just a placeholder until we know.
Correct,
What's
correct.
going to happen anyway.
Correct.
Right.
So it does, in some sense, my thinking is it doesn't really matter what we do now. Because we know we're gonna have to do something again later,
Right.
sometime after June, July. whenever.
Unless we guess right.
When was the last time you guessed right?
I'm pretty good.
So given that, I mean, I'm starting to think, why don't we just recommend a budget tonight? I mean, I enjoy meeting with all you people, but we could skip a couple meetings.
Well, unfortunately, because all the resolutions, all the motions you have to make, I didn't fully prepare. Partly because I also am waiting to fully recommend to you some things on debt service. Because there's some possibilities of paying off some debt early. And you would have to approve the total amount of debt service. And I don't quite have.
No, I was making a point by saying that. It
But
doesn't have to be.
the June 5th meeting can be very brief. If y'all need action now, that would be extremely. brief.
Because again, and like you're saying, it's a placeholder. It's not, it isn't a real number. It's never a real number, but it's less so now. And while in the past, we've made some minor adjustments throughout the year. This looks like it has a reasonable probability of being a major adjustment. So let's just plan on making a major adjustment and whenever it's available, whenever we know what the answer is. And in the meantime, we'll operate on a budget that is our best guess, which is 10.1, 10.2. I would push towards the higher side of that rather than the lower, just because.
Say it. I think it looks bad to our public if we go for a higher number and have to cut it down. It's hard to sell that to the voters, honestly. If we come in and they give us more, it's easier for people to understand that than that we made plans. And when you say you're gonna have budget on that, then you're giving direction to staff to hire people, which we may not have money for. I think the more conservative is a safer way to go. Is my,
And I don't disagree with that. I think what we would have to message is this is what the budget committee is recommending, this is what the board is, however, as the superintendent of the day-to-day operations, because I do not have yet from the Ways and Means or the governor, to be very honest, it's gonna be both ends of that. My response to the board and really to even to the budget committee would be, we wouldn't be doing that spending. And we'd have to make that crystal clear to the community to say, although this is passed, we are not moving forward because from a Salem perspective, we are not there. And I think that's just anyone that's state school fund or funding in the state schools is very complicated. So I think we just have to be thoughtful about how and what that looks like and then how we communicate it.
People don't really
Correct.
take the time to understand. it.
Correct.
And it's very hard to try and explain, well, we thought we get this, but we only got this. It's easier to say.
And then they took
"We
it away
budgeted," Yeah,
a year later.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's-
I think that's why I want to point out to you, really, the only thing this does is replenish contingencies
Mhm.
that
Right.
99 take away.
And we're well
That
in
is
that
literally all
percentage
it's
at
filling up.
1.1 and you know,
it's
and
important.
you don't have to do extra work for no reason. Also,
And if we went to 10.3, I wouldn't recommend we change any of the salary line. It would be either more contingencies, or it would be potentially, again, you could put some placeholders for computer replacement, things like that, that we know we're gonna need eventually.
And my recommendation is, and I'm just gonna say, my recommendation as the superintendent would be, if we're gonna go that route, we do need to put it into contingency and just identify it. So again, if you want us to come back potentially with because this is 10-1, correct me, right? If you wanted to have us come back to you on two Mondays from now with a 10-2 and a 10-3 with what those contingencies are, I think that's gonna be the safest route, because again, we can then explain to the community, this is our budget. These are, again, if we get the actual funding, that we would then be able to move money into different areas based off of that. So again, I think that is a possibility. Although she said we could put it into other line items, I think from a messaging, the contingency may be a better approach. It's just something for you all
We
to
would-
think through.
Put it in one-time spending items, so right, Byron? Buy a new police car, don't hire a new police officer.
Right.
From our city days, that's what we were. You have extra
Like
money,
what,
buy a new police car.
but
don't
we
hire
were
a-
going down on the contingency, let's see, yeah, 1.7 million, basically. So we're not gonna get that much more. We might get 1.54. So even if we just put contingencies back, not even all the way where they were, we would use all
Right.
that up to 10.3.
Well, is that 10-3? So I see 1.545 twice. Does that mean at 10-3 that would be a 3 million and change step increase?
No, it's
from
another,
9.9?
no, the 1.5 is up from 9.9. Yes, so at 10.3. It'd be 1.5 on top of what I gave you tonight, it'd be 3 million on top of what I gave you last week.
Okay.
And that's all within the 10% adjustment.
The 10% adjustment is only afterwards,
Right.
or after you approve it and forward it to the board, then we have the 10% rule.
Up or down, or is it just down?
It's a,
Up.
it's, yeah.
So if you did the 10.1. And that was what the budget committee landed at,
Right, approved.
and then you get 10.3, that's within the board's discretion.
At that point, for us, this 1.5 million is not 10% of our
So
total
they
general
would
fund.
have-
So
would-
they can choose,
Yeah, the
yes,
board
they
would have
can
to-
choose.
But you mentioned there's a
Change.
restriction on going up, as opposed to going down.
After adoption,
Can we avoid?
after adoption,
Can we avoid a hassle starting at that 10.3 million?
yeah, not really. I mean, then we're just, if we don't get it, then you. Again, it's kind of hard to explain. We have all this money in the budget you're not spending. Why aren't you spending all that money? Well, we didn't really get that. So you'd still want to, I would still recommend, if we did go 10-3 and got 10-1, we would still do a budget adjustment down.
Right.
To be more realistic.
Right.
And you would need the budget committee to do that, right?
No,
No, because it's
the
not. gonna
board,
be
the
10.
The
board
board
can do
to
that.
do that, okay.
And we
Or
would,
if we
assuming
go-
we get audited next year, that we also get dinged for that if we budget a bunch of money and then don't spend it.
There is an audit point that if you are within a certain variance of your budget. That you are off, yes, you can get an audit mention, but it's not a huge.
And
It
under,
would also say in the audit what was going on.
yeah, and
Right,
under the
so it's
circum,
It's really a
Management
non,
response. Management response would be, well, there's a good reason we were that. way."
right. I've never seen an audit report where when there was something like that, where you absolutely couldn't control it,
Yeah,
that
and-
it was
and
a
as-
real thing.
and as a superintendent, right, like that management response, again, I think we just have to communicate with the community on what this actually really means. And again, I think we will write it, I mean this, we will, just as we did last week. We wrote a story about this and put it on. We are going to, after every one of these meetings, work through and continue to tell the community about the budget and the budget process and where we are, because I think it's gonna help our community
But it's really
Understand.
hard if you don't have connection to the school
understand.
to get
Right.
any of that information. I don't get it. I don't see it. I don't have children. I don't in school with here. I don't have any friends about this.
Was it in the newspaper?
Yeah.
Really not very, I didn't think it was enough. But it's difficult. And it's not the fault of any of this, it's just because we no longer have a local newspaper, we no longer get good coverage. And it's hard to get word out to people.
If we have a very detailed news release, though, they are more likely to put the information in, because they don't have to do much to it.
Right.
Right,
So that would be a good
yeah,
detailed.
and
news
again,
release
for the very
to spend time on.
people who get the items.
Right, I know.
Do we put
But
those
how many
updates on our
Yeah, we
website?
post that on the website.
Yeah.
Because that's where I go for the
You know,
information.
the paper doesn't get, the IO doesn't have a very big circulation.
No.
So is it, I was just trying to think in terms of communication. This would effectively be an interim budget. We're gonna,
Yeah.
we're gonna make use of the contingency funds to hold that money. And then we review this once the state legislature has agreed to what we're actually gonna get. And so I guess as long as it's legal to communicate it as this is a temporary step. It's certainly a fiscally sound step. It's, we're not doing something shady. It's, all out in the open. We're just saying, we don't know what this is gonna be, and we are required by law to say something. And so we're gonna say this temporarily.
Maybe you can't use that word temporary, though, because you have to adopt it, but it's
Yeah.
pending
Right.
approval of the
I-
final.
yeah. Right.
Yeah.
because-
Or we're gonna adopt this budget with full expectation that we will be revising it
Right.
at some point in the
Right.
future.
Right, that's probably.
That's more than usual expectation.
Yeah.
That we will be realizing.
And I think we just have to be, again, as we have, if we get to that point and Cece and I come to you the first 2, 3, 4 months of the school year, I think we just are gonna have to sort of be a broken record, remember when we had, and this is where we were,
Well,
and have to remind the
frankly,
community
If
of
it
that.
were 10-3 and it really honestly looked like that was a new base. And the next biennium was going to be better and better and better, and the board felt comfortable with investing in more people or moving the people in ESSER to the general, but I would probably pull the budget committee back together, just make sure you all are having a little, having a chance to deliberate that. Rather than me just develop
Yeah.
something and throw it in front of the board and go, hey, here's 10-3, let's spend all this money from now on. Not my thing, not my favorite thing. to
And
do.
we're not there.
I think Becky's right, though. I think we need to work a little harder than we might normally
To
to make
communicate.
sure
Yep.
that we put that information out there as well as we can. I mean, it's never gonna be perfect, but especially given, other things that might happen next year, we definitely don't want people to get the wrong impression about the way we deliberated about this budget.
Do you ever work with Ann Chef?
Yeah, we work, yes, and we worked with her on the message that came out last week too,
Right,
so.
and-
So the other thing is, both cities send out a newsletter,
Mhm.
they email them. And I don't know if we could collaborate with them to have a
There's so many
button
partnerships.
on their newsletter. I don't know, to say, to learn school budget news, push this button.
I mean, we could,
And post
we
the link. I
have
don't know.
abilities to get this to every household. I mean, that's not, that is not an unrealistic from
Okay.
whether
Yeah.
that be via email or whether we do some sort of.
Well, households by email would be only our families, not
Right,
everybody.
right.
Correct, but I'm gonna say both. We could do it by our families. But we also have the ability, if we needed to, again, it's gonna be a funding line to be able to communicate out via a flyer, however you wanna,
Yeah.
from to the community
I
from
mean, the
that
district
perspective.
for a very short time did a quarterly
Yeah,
newsletter.
and we're
that
talking about
went
moving
to
back to that.
every mailbox.
Yeah, I post.
Yeah, we're
But
talking about
I
moving
know
back
it's
to that.
funding.
Very expensive.
I like
Yeah,
that.
that's a
I knew
lot
that
of
it was very expensive, but I
Yes.
really did like that.
I think one suggestion would be on the district website. Where you have departments, you have board. I think if you set up a separate budget committee tab. That we could communicate. Like the adopted budget,
Yeah, it's on the finance page. We have to post.
so it is on the
those.
finance page.
Yeah, and all of these minutes and things are part of the final budget book. But I think maybe adding this summary, whenever we submit to the IO, making
Yeah,
sure
we
that's
can do-
posted there directly, and then on the main page. Emily hates this when we add stuff to the main page, but we can say current status of budget, click here, and it would go to the
Yeah.
finance page.
Because then if we've got someone that's asking about it, we can say, hey, go to the website.
Yeah.
Look at this
It's
spot.
on the homepage.
Yeah, and you can get the information you need. Because when you get asked these things, you never have the information on you. So,
I like
I
the
have
idea
it.
I like the idea of the newsletter, especially if we're gonna be talking about bond in the future. Just
Be nice to be
letting
ahead of that
people,
one.
get ahead of that, yeah.
Do you have a number just kind of on an outer trail here? What percentage of families in Monmouth Independent have children in school?
So this is on average of our really 3170 students, that's a total of 1,900 families. So again, 1,900 times 2 is how many people?
But I don't know what percentage that is. of
Right,
all
but so you're
families.
talking there is how many, so if that's, let's say 2, and even if you put 2 per household. Or you add in that 3,100, we're still only looking
Right,
at approximately, what's that?
there are many households with children.
Yeah, 20% of our total, yeah, we're probably 20% of our total
20,
population.
no, 24, 23 was what I was
So-
in Colorado, and he said, well, it's hard then to
Do we
get people
have-
to be understanding and interested in when they don't have a connection.
So do we have, I guess, where is the resource officer line item? Is that in this budget? Could you refresh my memory on where that goes? And
It-
can the ESSER funds fund resource officer?
Could, but then they go, ESSER funds go away.
Right, but you have the benefits for a year at least.
We have 1.5 FTE resource managers.
In the budget.
In the general fund budget, it's on the line item is 390, other general, professional and technical services.
Oh, okay.
So it's part of a whole lot of other people we fund out of the general fund that are technically
Mhm.
related. And I'll point out to you in the packet tonight, we've not sent out ahead of time. But I do have the total budget as it stands now. And I have it presented 2 ways. One is the by program, which those are the function 4-digit numbers. The other is by expense type, which is the object line item you're used to looking at. And if between those two, you can find out things like that. So for example, the officers are in the general fund under line item 390. But they are also on the program budget under 211X, which is attendance, safety, and social work programming. So they're part of that line item as well. But two different ways, and those two numbers don't tie out because some of those professional services are not related to attendance, safety, and social work. They're related to something else. And they would be in a different program. Those are just different ways that we show those.
Okay, that's actually pretty neat. Being able to see the total funds, that's a nice presentation.
Yeah, this total funds again. For each of the fund groups, so you have Fund 100, which is our general fund, you have the 200s, which are all those grants, student body funds, donations, things like that. 300s is debt service, which is why their only expenses are down there in the debt service section. And the Fund 400, which is our capital expenditures. And which has been just regular capital expenditures plus the greenhouse project. And Rachel has her chair.
Yeah, Cease, did you say that you did include that in the packet that went out, or can that go out to us?
No,
So we have
that's-
that too.
Yeah, sorry, Paula, we didn't send this today. No, I'm sorry, Rachel, we will send that to you right now. That's a 2-pager that I did just tonight, along with a draft of our budget narrative and summary, but it's all a draft. Sorry, and John and Rachel will get those out to you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yep. But if y'all want something other than 10.1, then I'll changing all of it and sending it fresh.
But they're all stay the same except for the contingent funds, right?
All it changes is contingent.
That's the legislators know that we're expecting at least that.
Many districts around the state are budgeting at 10.3 because that's what they need to keep up current services.
That's right. I mean, I think part of me is just optimistic. I mean, there's a big pile of money there, and legislatures are not good at not passing it out because they get bonus points for that. So it's likely that it's gonna go up substantially, whether it makes it all the way to 10.3 or not. I wouldn't bet on it, but certainly possibility. And then I think part of it is just, us being optimistic too, to say, this should be able to work out. Let's aim a little higher than 10.1 and not go all the way to 10.3 would be my input. I would not go home crying if that didn't happen, but that would be my 2 cents worth, or penny and a half or whatever.
Well, maybe what we can do, because I think we want to get everybody's feedback here, is kind of, if everybody can just go through and say, if we were going to decide a number and we're kind of throwing a dart at the wall, admittedly.
We are.
If, where everybody's comfort level is, that way we can get a feeling for that. So I'll start and we'll just share and then we can figure out, where we want to go from there. I think 10.1 would be where I would land because it's right in between the two. It's pretty justifiable. I just think 10.1 from a messaging standpoint, I think, that's not too aggressive, but just right down the middle. So that's where I would be. So maybe we can just kind of go through.
I just gave my speech, so
10-2. Beat off.
I'm gonna say 10-2 as well. That's just because it's less to have to pump into the contingencies. But I'm pretty optimistic too, but got me in trouble plenty of times. But I gotta stay positive and think that, that our legislator's gonna come through for us. So I'd say 10-2, so I'm comfortable.
I'm optimistic too, and I'm with you, Don, like if they get with all this money, that's why I was saying in the beginning, like, they got all this money now. How can they possibly rationalize not giving it to schools, especially with the four priorities, and actually, school and mental health, we're in both of those.
Yes.
So, but, just logistically, knowing that you can, fall into that 10% if you do 10-1, you already have the work done. It's only gonna, contingency is the only thing that's changing. I don't see any positive necessarily coming out from making it higher than 10-1. I don't think that we're signaling for the legislatures really, maybe, but I don't know. I mean, I would defer to you guys for that. Like, do they really look at what we're saying?
They ask every single of 190 districts and say, okay, let's
Yeah,
tally how
exactly.
many of you are budgeting at this.
I totally
not sure
irrational
that.
to think that they're looking at us, maybe Portland.
But
But-
I do think if this entire committee and board were to email our legislator and representative, that's gonna,
And say, look, we already did this based on 10-3.
I mean, that's gonna be a huge, again, I think that is impact. You are making a statement for kids. And I just want to remind you all, right, like, although we are talking high level, I'm gonna say adult things, this money is for who? Really,
Right.
the service of our students, and obviously that then the supports of our staff go with that, right? I don't want to separate that, but this
So
helps us
that's
to
the
get to
one
that
way
point.
that I would think that it would be worth going higher. Then I would say 10-3 then, why not? Because we still can go down anytime, right? We don't even have that 10%
And
restriction.
frankly, what 10-3 does again, is make sure that all those things in ESSER when we're sitting here a year from now are fully back in the general.
We have to also commit with getting those communications out, like, instead of just thinking that they're gonna be looking at our thing. And also commit to getting all of that, information shared in the community, why we did this, having a background for it, so it just doesn't look irresponsible. I actually think we'll get 10-3, because that has been a very consistent call all the way from beginning to end from the schools, and so anything less than that with all this money, it's cash windfall practically here that they run into. Anything less than what the school's been telling them all this time they need looks kind of terrible, I think. So I don't know. I would be okay with 10-3 if that's if we're sending a message, because if you think they're listening to those messages, then I would be willing to take that risk.
I think they are.
If she started at 10-1.
I did, 10-1 for us. Practically, if it wasn't for the messaging, that is literally the only reason to say 10-3. Because we can, as a board, we can work together to make it work with any of these numbers. Once we figured out the 10% thing and going, what the rules are, go up, go down, we can make it work with any of these numbers. But if the most important thing today is to make sure the legislature knows that we really need this 10-3. We weren't kidding when we said 10-3 before. In fact, we've done all this work to say, this is what it is, 10-3. Then that makes sense to me. 10-3. There. Well, to me, that kind of messaging is important, So thank you for explaining it a different way. That makes total sense to me. I still don't think they're looking at us. But if we write all those letters and do all the news releases, then that will be a little more help.
Where do you think? You
I'm
and
gonna tip it, Becky.
I'm still at 10-1,
10-1.
and I'll write letters.
Aaron?
On those letters, we can send those more.
Yes, absolutely,
You should.
absolutely. You should actually send them from that.
Yeah, you're not using district resources to send an email.
Or not just
I'm at
individuals.
10-3. I think since we're talking about that, I'm speaking on this. My thoughts are a little more forward looking and have to do with our rollover money. And I don't mind dipping into that and spending for for stuff, but I think we have to have a big picture of it. We don't talk about 5 years from now very often, and
I try.
I know. And so I don't mind spending down those rollover funds as long as there's a plan in place to replenish them, as long as we know, okay, 5 years from now, we're gonna need to do new curriculum. So we're gonna have to spend this money. So we can take the next 3 years and build up our reserves so that we can spend that back in, just making sure that we're. Or PERS, yeah. So as far as I'm concerned, we go for the gusto and go for 10-3. But I think this committee and the board need to work with district administration to work on a long-term strategic plan. So it's not.
Yeah.
It's not just every year we're going into this kind of new. We know what the plan is 5 years from now, from a curriculum perspective, from a staffing perspective. And that includes especially this push on CTEC stuff. We need to be more forward-looking in our budgeting process as opposed to saying, well, we've got 500 employees and so we need this amount of money. We need to know where we're going. And that starts with how we allocate our.
Let's just ask one other question. So you referred to the fact that other districts are doing it this way. How do we know that?
My business managers, our listserv
Okay.
has quite a lively discussion.
Oh, I see.
about
Okay.
What are you budgeting at? What are you budgeting at? What are you budgeting?
So it's kind
Some
of
people
hearsay,
are
but
budgeting
it's
at
pretty
9.9.
reliable.
Some are budgeting at 9.9 because they're not optimistic or because they feel like that's the only number I know. I mean, so it varies.
I mean, we did so far surpass the projected numbers. That's the main reason why I don't.
Well, I wouldn't call myself an optimist, but I'd call myself a limit pusher. So 10.3 cents.
Not known for his optimism.
Well, I think that Byron has a new talent, it's called mind reading. Because you just said what I was gonna say. So, no, I'm happy, because now there'll be two of us.
Yeah,
We have a strategic plan. We have a direction that we're going with curriculum. We're not just treading water, we're making progress. Our absolute moral obligation is to serve the children of this community. And I think 10-3, I'm unequivocal about it. I mean, it's absolutely because we know that we can move the funds in legal and ethical ways. And I just realized I was leaning back in the chair like I was at home. Just relaxing.
Take a microphone.
Bring on
so
lemonade.
we can hear it.
Yeah. I think this is an opportunity that we are obligated to take. And as it's been said already, okay, so if it didn't come out to be 10-3, okay, well, we know how to deal with that ethically and legally. But the whole reason that we're here is to serve the kids of this community and do our very best to prepare them for adulthood in a very complex world. There you have my thing and my mind reading colleague over there.
I'm sorry, I'm talking too much, but perhaps we can add a financial element to our strategic plan as well. When we start doing goal setting and things.
Yep.
forward,
Yep, we can add that
include
in.
a financial aspect.
Yep. Okay, and we can talk through that even in our June retreat.
Yep.
We can even talk through that in our June retreat with what that looks like.
Costing things now.
So the consequence of going last in the room is that everyone
Well,
has said.
We got
Gotta
two
keep
more.
on the
Two more.
No, last in the room, yeah, is everyone has said exactly what they say. We do have an obligation to our students and our community. And we know that Esther's going away. And we don't want those programs going away, so I'm gonna go 10-3 as well.
Perfect, thank you. So who all do we have online? I see John. You want to go, John?
Rachel.
John and Rachel.
Sure, I'll go next. I'm just appreciate what everyone else has commented. I agree on the 10.3. There's the notion of that sends a message. I think not going 10.3 would send the message that it's not actually necessary. And I don't think that's really the feeling or sentiment of the group. So I say we go with that, with all the caveats that, we can't overspend in the interim, nothing like that. So let's go. I would be for going with that.
And Rachel,
Is what we're trying to decide is how we want you to build the budget, like, and so this is gonna be part of what the decision of what you're putting to the county about raising our local tax rates too.
No, sorry, Rachel, this is only for the general fund. This 10 point whatever is general fund, and that is only for state appropriations. The general fund, we cannot change the property tax rate at all in the general fund. That's what Measure 5 and 50 fixed for us. You don't even get to talk about that. The only thing we tell the county is how much debt service we are going to pay in the coming year. And we haven't discussed that at all tonight. And that is not dependent on this at all, because that money will not come from the general fund. So two different things there.
Okay, right. Okay, good. Well, because I'm guess I'm gonna be the dissenter a little bit, because I feel really cautious about not counting on replacing the ESSER funds or something. So I feel really cautious about not projecting that. And so as far as building a budget, I guess I would be as conservative as possible. So that's just my input.
well, that's fair.
So 10.1 is, the 9.9 is the most conservative. 10.1 is what we presented tonight that doesn't spend more, it plans for more to be able to be spent. Do you have a preference between those two, Rachel?
Rachel?
Oh, sorry, I had the mute on. I feel confident that an increase will come, but how about yes, projecting at a 10 flat would be just where I would fall. But everybody, it sounds like there's consensus for going higher, but my input is to keep it conservative there.
That's fair.
Good, noted.
So question then. So let's say that it sounds like 10.3 was kind of the general majority. But how many votes do we have to pass that if, like, say, Becky, myself, and Rachel don't vote for that because we were at 10.1 or below, you still have enough to pass that? I guess I'm just curious.
The vote will have to be a majority of the committee.
Of the committee, so you
The
would,
quorum of the whole.
of the committee,
Whole committee.
so you would have enough then.
It can't be a plurality, it has to be a majority.
Right.
So essentially, even if we lost a vote or 3, you could still pass it at 10.3 then, based on what we heard today.
How many
I think
people
so.
are on the committee?
The only, let's see,
Is it
Director
yours?
Love is not here tonight.
There's
We have a couple
vacancies.
vacant, so it's just based off of, I think everyone's here except for Director Love. We've got 2 online, correct?
Yeah, 2
Yeah,
online.
so I think that is the full committee.
There's a couple of seats, for one
We have
seat or
11
so that
bills.
are empty on the budget.
11,
11 bills.
okay, so you need 6. So based on what we heard tonight, there would be enough to do 10.3. There'd be probably more if we put forward a 10.1 or 10.2. But
What I would just add to that is if Cease and I get some dramatically different and all of a sudden, like, we get a firm 10-2, we're gonna come to you on June 5th with that we feel more confident, although we talked through this,
Mm,
because I think this was important.
Yeah.
To see where everybody is, but if we're hearing or getting further information that it potentially is like a solid 10-1 or 10-2, we are gonna bring that back to you, and with those caveats is, this is why we're doing this, because of the information that we shared. Again, I don't know that in 2 weeks we will. I hope so, my hope is that we will,
Seems unlikely.
but I think that's the reality.
So I just want to be clear, if you got 10.3, the state is funded at 10.3 billion. There's enough that comes to this district to put those ESSER positions into the general fund.
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
so that's a good thing to tell legislators.
right.
right?
Yeah, and again, we wouldn't need to, because we need to spend the ESSER funds.
No, but
In the first
after,
year, so we
but the
would
second
have some
year-
extra contingencies in this first year, knowing we would be spending more in the second year than just a regular.
but if you didn't have the contingencies, would you have enough in the second year to
No.
pay for those
We-
positions?
no, and we,
No, at this 10.1, remember, all I'm doing is
Right, no.
refilling the contingencies, which are really specific,
And not even all the
not,
way.
not adding mental health, not adding, we have a couple of other positions in ESSER that
Right, but
So in
even at 10.3, you still would not have enough money without contingency in the
I
second year.
we would in the second year,
Okay.
but we get the money in the first year. So I would put some of the first year money in a contingency,
So we can
knowing
spend it in-
it would be more than the current contingency, right?
Right.
So it would be built up and look artificially high in the first year of the biennium, knowing we would spend down more than normal in that second.
So if we get, say we get 10.1 or 9.9 or whatever, we have enough for the 23-24 school year for us
Correct.
to keep the ESSER programs.
Correct.
In
Correct.
the 24-25, they would drop off.
Correct.
and that's been our communicate, and I want to be clear, that's been our conversations with union leadership as we talk through this. Again, obviously, they have advocate voices as well. And again, even as I've had some staff chats, I have shared that. If we're 9.9, we're fine 23-24, we are not 24-25, and we would have some version of cuts. I'm being very transparent with that,
At 9.9, we
At
will have
9.9,
cuts,
yeah.
not,
And
not
10.1 as
Right.
well.
potentially, yeah, yep.
could potentially have.
Yeah.
We will definitely have cuts of ESSER positions, we might have others depending on.
Mhm.
But 10.3. And even, let's say 10.25, right? Like there's some pieces where we would be close. But again, that 10.3 would, Cece and I feel confident we could, with what we have built. Current year 22-23, we would have for 23-24, and we would have for 24-25, and possibly a slight being able to adjust things, not a ton.
Well, we'd have
We'd have a little bit of flexibility, but
better options for adopting additional curriculum. We
Correct.
have better options.
After the federal funds run out at that rate, at that level, we can still continue to have that help.
correct. And I will tell you, the reason I continue to say 10.3 is again, and you'll see some things at the next board meeting, like we're having some academic successes. We're having, even though it's hard, behavior successes, right? There are some really good things that I'm very proud of first, our kids and their resiliency. And then second, our staff who are being resilient and they're tired. I mean, this has been 3 hard years and they're working, all of both of those groups are working extremely hard and doing good things. Again, we don't have it all figured out. I want to be clear, and we continue to grow and adjust based off of our continued conversations, but we are moving in a very good direction academically, behaviorally, and social mentally.
Perfect. I saw on the budget that there's public comments
Yes,
on the budget. Do we
I-
have any
I-
public comment?
No one submitted for public
No?
comment.
Okay.
There's no one in the room.
So I guess I'd open it up if there's any other questions or discussions, but otherwise we can go into recess and hopefully we'll be at some sort of a decision point on June 5th. Whether that's
We hope so.
you know, you'll bring
We'll bring.
maybe a
10-3.
couple versions or 10-3 or something and then 10-2.
As soon as you leave, he's for buying this box that just has a big dial on the front of it. You just turn it to whatever the state fund is and it spits out a budget. It'll be AI driven.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, somebody asked what we could do the budget at on Chat GPT and let me know.
Tell you what the truth is. So any other last minute questions before we go into recess? Okay, well, thank you for
The goal is to
make a
be
decision.
able to decide next.
That would be the goal. But thank you for everyone for your time and we will go into recess until the next meeting, which is June 5th. 2023.
We have scheduled for 5 PM for budget committee. I think we can make it later than that. We don't need to spend an hour and a half before the board meeting because I will give you a 10-3 and all of the backup documents and some motions and
So what did you suggest?
So what time?
Let's leave it at 5 and if we feel in a week that we haven't really changed in this conversation, then I say we'll adjust to 5:30. I don't know that we're gonna need more
So
than
you
that.
said it's at 5?
5.
Okay, it's on the calendar at 6.
Mine's at 6.
So is mine.
Yeah, that's what I said too.
Oh,
Oh, so we will need to adjust that then.
6 may not be enough. And that was typically because at that point, we would be farmer here. And so we've often done a 6
Yeah. we'll switch
just
it.
for
We'll shift that.
Wait, did you say
adoption.
So I'm gonna be at the close.
No,
Still 5. I thought you were changing your mind
Unless
about.
they
5.
will call
Yeah.
next couple weeks. So,
Oh,
Yeah, we'll
No,
we have lots of free time, Paula.
Dialing in.
Yeah, we will adjust it.
5? They'll change it. on the
We'll
calendar.
adjust.
They'll change.
We typically
Yes,
just meet at
that's
6 because it's a quick.
Very normal.
Yeah. Yeah, but okay, it's funny because I can't change it.
I think.
No, I'll have
I think
Emily
Emily
change it.
Yeah. It has to get changed by.
Yeah.
She sent those out early in the year, but
Yeah, we'll get that shifted.
Okay. Well, we'll move into recess and thank you, everyone.
I think you're right. Okay, thank you.